Have you ever been trapped in a conversation that felt less like a friendly chat and a whole lot more like you were involuntarily attending someone else's personal press conference?
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. You know exactly the type of situation I'm talking about. You're standing there, maybe holding a lukewarm cup of coffee at some networking event, or, I don't know, maybe you're cornered in your aunt's kitchen at a holiday party.
The kitchen is always the most dangerous spot for that.
Exactly. The kitchen trap. And the person standing right in front of you is just talking at you. Not with you, at you.
Yeah.
You're nodding, doing the polite smile, but your eyes are just starting to glaze over.
Just looking for an exit.
Yeah. And right in that moment, you have this profound, somewhat depressing realization. You could probably walk away, replace yourself with a cardboard cutout, and the speaker wouldn't even notice.
They'd just keep right on talking to the cardboard.
They wouldn't miss a single beat. They are just holding the floor relentlessly, and you're just the closest physical object with ears. Well, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today, we're going to make absolutely sure you're never the person holding that press conference. But more importantly, we're going to give you the exact practical tools to navigate your way out of those situations. Or, better yet, turn them into actual human connections.
Which is really the ultimate goal.
Right. So our mission today is to decode the invisible architecture of a good dialogue. We want to help you transform from a passive listener, someone who's just nodding and silently praying for the interaction to be over into a master communicator.
It's a phenomenal mission. And honestly, the materials we're using to get there today are incredibly unique.
Yeah, they really are.
We're not looking at a standard self-help book or a business communication seminar. We're actually digging into a transcript from an advanced C2 level English language learning program.
Which sounds totally wild at first.
It does. But the hosts of that program spend their time deeply analyzing the highly nuanced mechanics of things like turn-taking, the real definition of active listening, and exactly how you transition from what we all casually call small talk into genuine deep talk.
Right. And I know exactly what you, the listener, might be thinking right now. You're probably listening to this and saying to yourself, wait, an English language learning program? I already speak English. I've been speaking it my whole life. Why do I need to learn how to do it?
It's a fair question.
It totally is.
Oh.
But that's exactly why this breakdown is so brilliant. When you're trying to teach someone to master a language at the absolute highest possible level, like the C2 level, you can't just hand them a dictionary and teach them vocabulary and grammar.
No, that won't make them sound fluent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to actually teach them the unwritten social mechanics of how humans naturally interact in that language. You have to teach them the invisible rules that native speakers use every single day but can never actually articulate.
And that is precisely what makes this so valuable. While it's ostensibly designed for people learning the language, the concepts they're exploring are fundamentally rooted in universally applicable psychology and sociology.
Yeah.
It really isn't just about English vocabulary. It's about the fundamental mechanics of human connection.
Definitely.
The core theme that they establish right out of the gate, which I find absolutely brilliant, by the way, is this idea that knowing yourself, looking inward, and understanding your own identity, your opinions, your tastes.
Right, the internal stuff.
Yeah, that internal monologue, that is only half the battle. Communicating that self to others, turning that internal monologue outward and sharing it effectively is a completely different skill set.
Wow.
It requires an architecture, it requires structure, rules, and a deep, almost subconscious understanding of the invisible forces that are at play the second two human beings open their mouths to speak.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that distinction between just speaking words aloud and actually conversing is the foundation of everything we're going to get into today.
It's the baseline.
Right, the materials draw a really hard, definitive line between the two. You can be an incredibly articulate person. You can have an amazing vocabulary and be able to give a brilliant, impassioned 5-minute monologue about a topic you love.
Sure.
But a monologue is not a conversation. And the analogy used to explain this difference is something I just haven't been able to get out of my head. They say a conversation is a tennis match, not a golf game.
It's such a powerful analogy.
I love it so much.
And if we really take a second to analyze what is happening physically and psychologically in those two sports, the differences map perfectly onto how we communicate with each other.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Let's look at golf first. Golf is, by its very nature, an entirely solitary pursuit.
Yeah, it's just you.
Exactly. Sure, you might be walking the course alongside other people, maybe chatting between holes, but when it comes to the actual game, your sole focus is on your own ball. your own stance, your own swing, and your own trajectory.
You're not worrying about anyone else's swing.
Right. You hit your ball, you walk to exactly where it landed, and you hit it again. What the other players in your group are doing does not fundamentally alter the mechanics of your swing.
Nope.
If they hit their ball into the water, it doesn't change how you hit yours.
That is so true.
So if you treat a conversation like a golf game, you're essentially just walking up to the conversational tee, hitting your own thoughts into the air, admiring your own shot, and completely ignoring the other person.
Just watching it fly.
Yep. That is a monologue. It's conversational golf.
And man, we have all been stuck playing conversational golf with someone who thinks they are having the absolute time of their life.
They're having a great game.
They are. They're just teeing up these massive drives of thought, hitting their golf balls right past our heads, completely unbothered by whether we're even watching. You just stand there feeling like a caddy.
Holding their clubs.
Exactly. But then you look at tennis. Tennis is the exact opposite. You physically cannot play a game of tennis alone.
Exactly. Tennis requires a constant, kinetic, reciprocal relationship with the other player on the court.
You have to pay attention.
You have to anticipate where the ball is going before it even crosses the net. You have to be agile. You're constantly reacting to the spin, the speed, and the specific placement of the other person's shot.
Yeah, you can't just zone out.
You can't just stand dead center in the middle of the court with your eyes closed and swing blindly, hoping you hit something.
Right.
In linguistics and sociology, this entire reciprocal process is described as turn-taking.
Turn-taking.
It's the mutual, unspoken agreement between two people to share the floor. It implies a social contract.
Okay.
It's a contract that says, I'm going to hit this ball over to you, but I fully expect you to hit it back to me.
Turn-taking. It sounds so incredibly basic, right? It's like
Yeah.
the kind of thing you learn in kindergarten when you're learning how to share toys in the sandbox.
It really does.
But what's fascinating here is how often this fundamental agreement is just completely violated in adult life.
Yeah.
And this brings us right back to that personal press conference we were talking about at the start of the deep dive.
Oh, yes.
The materials use a very specific term for this person. They call them the monopolizer. I love that term, the monopolizer.
It's a fantastic term because it accurately describes the literal economic theft that is happening in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah.
They are monopolizing the single most valuable resource in any human interaction time and attention.
They're just stealing it all.
They are hoarding it. They hold the floor relentlessly without any intention of giving it up. And what is so deeply painful about enduring one of these personal press conferences is that the mutual agreement of turn-taking, that social contract we just talked about, has been completely discarded.
It's gone.
The monopolizer is basically out there playing golf on a tennis court.
Yes. That is the perfect visual. They're just standing on the baseline, serving aces into an entirely empty net over and over again, while you're standing on the other side with your racket in your hand, wondering if you are ever, at any point, going to get to play.
It's exhausting.
It is. And what really struck me is how this dynamic actually affects us, the people stuck listening. It notes that for people who are trying to master a language, and honestly, I'd argue this applies to absolutely everyone, native speaker or not, the fear of becoming that monopolizer, or conversely, the paralyzing fear of trying to interrupt a monopolizer to get a word in, is a massive, debilitating roadblock.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a profound sociological anxiety that a lot of us carry around.
Anxiety, yeah, absolutely.
On one hand, many of us are terrified of taking up too much space. We don't want to be perceived as annoying or self-centered, so we actively shrink back. We silence ourselves to avoid being the bad guy.
Nobody wants to be the guy holding the press conference.
Exactly. On the other hand, we get trapped with an actual monopolizer, and we are so intimidated by the sheer unyielding wall of words coming at us that we completely freeze.
Like a deer in headlights.
We literally don't know how to ethically and politely assert our fundamental right to take a turn.
Yeah.
This dual fear, the fear of being too much and the fear of confronting someone who is being too much, is what so often holds us back from true, authentic engagement.
We just give up.
We end up settling for this passive, detached listening simply because it feels vastly safer than risking a conversational collision.
It's so true. It feels safer just to let them keep hitting their golf balls. So how do we actually fix this?
It takes work.
Right. How do we ensure we don't accidentally become the monopolizer when we get excited about a topic? And how do we confidently force our way into the tennis match when someone else is hoarding the ball?
Well, it starts with a definition.
Yeah, it starts with completely redefining a term that we hear constantly, especially if you work in any sort of corporate environment. It's a total corporate buzzword. Act listening.
Active listening is definitely one of those phrases that has been so heavily overused in human resources, seminars, and corporate retreats that it has almost completely lost its actual meaning.
Totally. It's just jargon now.
If you ask most people what active listening is, they think it just means staring unblinkingly at the speaker, maintaining aggressive eye contact, and occasionally nodding your head so they know you haven't died.
The polite nod.
Right. But the advanced linguistic breakdown we're looking at reveals that true active listening is a highly complex, multi-layered cognitive activity. It goes so far beyond just nodding.
Right. And what I loved is how the breakdown actually calls out the things we think are active listening, but really are.
And fake active listening.
Exactly. For example, making all those little sounds while someone is talking. Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
See, you just did it.
Yeah.
There's a formal term for this. Back channeling. I had never heard that term before, but the second I read it, it made perfect sense.
It's a great descriptor.
We are providing this little back channel of audio just to let the person know we haven't fallen asleep with our eyes open. But this distinction made here is incredibly clear. These little sounds are merely signals of engagement. They are the absolute bare minimum.
They really are.
They're not the main event, and they definitely do not constitute true active listening.
Back channeling really is just the dial tone.
Oh, the dial tone. I like that.
It's the hum on the line that proves the connection hasn't dropped. Doesn't mean you're actually processing the data being sent over the line.
Right.
What's introduced as the critical psychological distinction of genuine active listening is the concept of validation and building.
Validation and building.
And honestly, mastering this hinges on a very profound, almost uncomfortable question that you have to ask yourself in the middle of any conversation.
Right.
Are you actually listening to understand, or are you just listening to respond?
Oof. That is the gut punch right there. I had to sit with that one for a minute when I first read it. Are you listening to understand, or are you just listening to respond? Because when you really think about it, we are all guilty of the latter.
We absolutely are, because it's a completely different cognitive process. And frankly, listening to respond is much easier.
It takes way less effort.
If you are just listening to respond, you are essentially just hovering. You're waiting for a microscopic pause in the other person's speech, a quick intake of breath, so you can immediately launch your own pre-planned, perfectly rehearsed story.
You're just waiting for your cue.
You aren't actually processing their emotions. You aren't analyzing their logic or empathizing with their experience. You are literally just tracking the cadence and rhythm of their voice, waiting for the red light to turn green so you can hit the gas on your own monologue.
Oh, man, yeah.
And if you're doing that, you aren't conversing. You aren't playing tennis. You are just waiting for your turn to step up to the tee and play golf again.
You're just standing there, white-knuckling your golf club, tapping your foot, waiting for them to finally get off the green so you can take your swing.
Exactly.
I can vividly picture myself doing this. Someone is telling a story about a bad vacation, and halfway through, I stop actually hearing their story because my brain goes, oh, I have a terrible vacation story too. I'm going to tell the story about the time I lost my luggage in Rome.
And then you're gone.
I am gone. For the next 3 minutes, I'm not listening to them at all. I'm just editing my Rome story in my head so it sounds punchy when it's my turn.
Precisely. And in doing so, you've completely abandoned the shared reality of the conversation.
It's so selfish when you framed it that way.
Well, it's natural, but yes, it's not a conversation.
Yeah.
So if back channeling isn't enough, and if waiting to launch your own story isn't conversing, what does actual validation and building look like in practice?
Yeah, give us the tools.
The materials give us these exact, high-level, practical phrases to use to bridge that gap. They suggest using very intentional language, saying things like, that is a fascinating perspective, specifically regarding, or to build on what you just said.
Okay, let's really look at those phrases because they aren't just polite filler. There's real architecture there.
There is. Let's analyze exactly why those specific phrases are so incredibly effective from a psychological and sociological standpoint.
I'm ready.
When you look someone in the eye and say, that is a fascinating perspective, specifically regarding, you are doing two very distinct, very powerful things simultaneously.
Okay.
First, you have the validation. You are explicitly, verbally confirming that their thought had inherent value. You're telling them they are worth listening to.
Right, which feels great for them.
Exactly. Second, and more importantly, you have the building phase. By adding the phrase specifically regarding and then referencing a detail they mentioned, you are offering empirical proof that you actually comprehended the nuance of their point.
You're proving you were listening.
Yeah. Yes. You aren't just giving them a generic cool story, bro. You are actively taking their raw conversational material, putting it on the table between you, and offering to help them construct something entirely new with it.
It changes the entire dynamic. And that other phrase, to build on what you just said, it's such a beautifully collaborative phrase.
It is.
It's the ultimate tennis move. You are cleanly returning the volley, but you're adding your own unique spin to the ball.
Yeah.
You aren't ignoring their shot, and you aren't just catching the ball and walking off the court.
Right.
I actually want to pause right here and ask you, the listener, to do a quick mental audit. Think about the conversations you've had today. Maybe it was over breakfast with your partner. Maybe it was a morning stand-up meeting at the office. Or maybe it was just a chat with a friend on the phone.
Think about your own role in them.
Were you actually building on the other person's points? Or were you just nodding, tossing out a few uh-huhs, and secretly editing your own stories while you waited to hit your own golf ball?
It's an important audit.
It's a really uncomfortable mirror to hold up to ourselves. But recognizing that instinct to just wait for our turn is the very first step to totally changing the architecture of how we chat.
It's a vital self-audit to do, but what's fascinating here is that the breakdown takes this concept of building and introduces a scenario that, at first glance, feels almost entirely contradictory to everything we've just discussed about being polite and attentive.
This part is wild.
It really is. We've established this rule that you need to actively listen, you need to validate, and you need to build. But it turns out that sometimes, in order to truly build on a point, to truly demonstrate that you are fully 100% engaged in the tennis match, you have to break what almost all of us consider to be the ultimate cardinal rule of good manners.
You have to interrupt.
You have to interrupt.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on this for a second, because here's where it gets really interesting, but also where it feels like we're breaking the law.
The interruption taboo.
Yes, the interruption taboo. I mean, we are taught from the time we were toddlers that interrupting is inherently, objectively rude. It means you're selfish. It means you think your words are more important than the other person's words.
That's the standard teaching.
Right. It means you flat out don't care about what they're saying. And beyond just basic manners, a lot of cultures have incredibly strict, rigid hierarchies and rules about who gets to speak and when.
Very true.
You don't interrupt your elders, you don't interrupt your boss. But the concepts we're exploring introduce this advanced linguistic idea that kind of blew my mind, and it's called cooperative overlapping.
Cooperative overlapping. When you first hear the term, it sounds almost like an oxymoron, doesn't it?
It really does, like jumbo shrimp.
Exactly, like deafening silence. How on earth can the act of stepping on someone else's words be considered cooperative?
It feels aggressive.
But if you study dynamic, informal conversations, particularly in certain English-speaking cultures, you'll find that this isn't rude at all. It's actually a vital, high-level tool for expressing intense enthusiasm and solidarity. Solidarity.
Okay. The synthesis of why this works and why it doesn't violate the social contract is crucial. When you use cooperative overlapping, you are not interrupting to stop the speaker.
That's the key difference.
You are jumping in to show them that you are on the exact same wavelength. You are acting as an amplifier for their point, not a mute button.
Okay, I think we need to make this super concrete, because there is an incredibly fine line between doing this right and being the most annoying person in the room.
Oh, a very fine line.
There's a perfect example that clarifies the difference. Let's call it the Paris-London rule.
Let's break down the Paris-London rule because it perfectly illustrates the mechanics of a good overlap versus a terrible one.
Okay, set the scene.
Imagine a scenario where you're at a dinner party, we're chatting, and I look at you and say, you know, I finally took that trip. I went to Paris last summer.
Okay, so if I'm utilizing cooperative overlapping correctly, I wouldn't even let you finish the word summer before I jump in enthusiastically and say, oh my gosh, Paris is absolutely breathtaking in July.
Now, technically, by the strictest definition of the word, I interrupted you. My voice literally overlapped your voice. I stepped on your sentence.
You did.
But look at the actual emotional result of that action. I didn't stop you from talking about Paris. I amplified your statement. I validated your experience before you even had the chance to finish sharing it.
Yes.
I injected a surge of positive energy into the conversation. It's like I'm cheering you on while you're running the bases.
Exactly. That is a highly successful cooperative overlap. It immediately signals high engagement, shared excitement, and active listening. I feel heard and validated instantly.
It feels good.
It does. But we have to contrast this with the dark side of interruption, which the linguistic breakdown refers to as hijacking.
Hijacking.
Hijacking is the polar opposite of cooperative overlapping. Let's look at the exact same dinner party scenario. I look at you and say, I finally took that trip. I went to Paris last summer.
And before you finish, I interrupt with, well, I went to London last year, and let me tell you, my hotel was an absolute disaster. The food was terrible.
Oh, man.
Oof. Right. Just hearing me role play that makes my skin crawl, it's so visceral.
It's awful.
That is a complete and total conversational dead end for you, the original speaker. You were excited to talk about Paris, and I just slammed the door in your face.
It's a complete derailment. You haven't amplified my point at all. You have essentially assassinated it.
Assassinated it. I love that.
You stole the topic, you aggressively made it about yourself, and you completely dismissed my experience as if it didn't matter. Hijacking is the ultimate, most toxic manifestation of listening only to respond.
It's the worst case scenario.
The hijacker in that scenario, here's the trigger word, travel, immediately realizes they have a travel story of their own sitting in their mental chamber and aggressively seizes the floor to tell it completely, regardless of what I was trying to communicate.
It's a conversational felony. You're stealing the car right out of the driveway.
You really are.
So if cooperative overlapping is this sign of a vibrant, engaged, great conversation, but hijacking is this egregious felony, how do we actually know which one we're doing in the heat of the moment?
Because it happens so fast.
Because I'm sure the person talking about London didn't think they were being a jerk.
Yeah.
They probably thought they were just relating to the topic of travel. How do we regulate this? It all comes down to a very specific emotional intelligence skill. Empathy.
Empathy is the absolute governing mechanism here. It's the brake pedal. You have to be able to read the room, or in a one-on-one scenario, dynamically read the micro-expressions on the face of the person you were speaking with.
Right, you have to pay attention to them.
Because here is the tricky part. Even if your intention is pure, even if you are genuinely attempting a cooperative overlap, and even if you are just trying to enthusiastically amplify their point about Paris, some people simply do not like having their sentences stepped on, ever.
That's a really good point.
Regardless of your intent, maybe they grew up in a household where interruption was strictly punished. Maybe they are neurodivergent and an interruption completely derails their train of thought. If your enthusiastic overlap causes the speaker to frown or pull back physically or stutter and lose their place, you must possess the immediate empathy to recognize that and back off.
You can't just keep pushing.
No.
Yeah.
You cannot force a cooperative, overlapping communication style onto someone who psychologically requires a rigid, one-at-a-time, turn-taking structure.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
You can't just enforce your rules on their tennis court. You have to constantly read their reaction in real time.
Exactly.
If you jump in with, Paris is breathtaking,
Yeah.
and their face lights up and they point at you and say, I know, right, the food was incredible.
Yeah.
Then boom, you have successfully overlapped and bonded.
The energy matches.
Right. But if they look annoyed, or they pause and give you a tight-lipped smile because you didn't let them finish their sentence, you need to have the self-awareness to immediately say, oh, I'm so sorry, I got excited. Please keep going. What were you saying about the summer?
You have to repair it instantly.
You have to give them the floor back. But listening to this, it brings up a really massive, glaring challenge.
What's that?
You can only really read the room, and you can only comfortably attempt a cooperative overlap if you already have some established baseline level of rapport with the person. You have to know their rhythms a little bit.
That's true.
What if you don't know the person well enough yet? What if you're at a conference or a friend's wedding and you are starting from absolute zero with a total stranger?
Now we're getting into the real challenge. Because starting from zero requires navigating what is arguably the most universally dreaded, widely complained about part of human socializing. Small talk.
Small talk. I could practically hear people groaning through their headphones just hearing the words.
Oh, the collective sigh.
We have all heard the complaints, and I am absolutely certain that you, listening right now, have probably made these exact complaints yourself.
I know I have.
Right. I despise small talk. I hate talking about the weather or the traffic on the I-95 or how long the line at the buffet is. It's so fake. I just want to skip all that superficial nonsense and have deep, meaningful, authentic connections with people.
It's a very common sentiment.
Well, I am going to step up to the podium right now and vigorously champion the defense of small talk, because the linguistic and psychological case made in these materials is incredibly compelling. Small talk is wildly, unfairly maligned.
It's entirely unfairly maligned, usually by people who don't understand its actual function.
Right.
Now, to be fair, the desire to skip small talk and jump straight into deep talk is a very understandable human impulse. We are social creatures. We genuinely crave intimacy, authenticity, and real connection.
Of course.
But if you look at the mechanics of human interaction, the idea that skipping small talk is actually a good or healthy thing is logically dismantled very quickly.
Okay, dismantle it for us.
Think about the practical reality of doing that. Imagine walking up to a complete stranger at a bus stop or an acquaintance you've only met once at work, completely bypassing all pleasantries and immediately asking them, "What is your deepest, darkest fear?"
Oh my God.
Or, "Tell me about your most traumatic childhood memory." Or, "What are your highly complex, controversial political views?"
Just 0 to 60 immediately.
It's not refreshing. It's incredibly intrusive. It violently violates the established boundaries of social safety.
Intrusive is the perfect word. I want everyone to genuinely imagine this. Imagine getting on a tiny elevator in your office building with a coworker from a different department who you only vaguely know.
The worst place for that.
The doors slide closed. It's just the two of you. And instead of looking up at the floor numbers and saying, "Man, crazy rain we're having out there, huh?" they slowly turn to you, look you dead in the eye, and say, "What is your biggest, most crushing regret in life?"
You'd run.
You would be terrified. You'd be backing into the corner, desperately mashing the emergency stop button.
Precisely. Because they haven't earned the right to that intimate information. They haven't established that they are a safe repository for your vulnerabilities.
Safety first.
And this is where a truly brilliant metaphor comes into play. Small talk is the entry fee you pay to establish rapport.
The entry fee.
Think of a conversation like a highly exclusive club. You cannot access the VIP area of deep, vulnerable talk without first paying the cover charge of trivialities at the front door.
I love that.
And if we break down the psychological subtext of small talk, it becomes utterly fascinating. When you are standing at that bus stop discussing the weather, you are not actually discussing the weather.
Right.
No one, literally no one, is genuinely seeking raw meteorological data from a stranger on the street. They all have weather apps on their phones.
Right. So if I'm not asking for a barometric pressure reading, what the heck am I actually saying when I complain about the rain? What is the hidden message?
You are communicating in a deeply ingrained, highly sophisticated social code. Discussing the weather or the traffic or the outcome of a local sports game is actually a way of signaling 3 vital foundational things to the other person.
Okay, what are they?
I am friendly, I am normal, and I am safe to talk to.
Friendly, normal, safe.
It is a vital evolutionary vetting process. By bringing up a neutral, universally understood topic, you are essentially pinging the other person's social radar to see if they react in a predictable, socially acceptable way.
Like sonar?
Exactly. If they respond to your mundane comment about the rain with the polite nod, an appropriate tone of voice, and a mildly related comment, yeah, supposed to clear up by Tuesday, though. They pass the vetting process.
You have the test?
They have proven that they understand the unwritten rules of engagement. They have demonstrated that they are a safe, functioning member of the social group.
I am friendly, I am normal, I am safe. I love that so much. I want you, the listener, to actively use this to reframe your next mundane interaction.
It's so helpful.
The next time you're stuck in an elevator or you're waiting in a frustratingly slow line at the coffee shop and the person next to you lets out a heavy sigh and says, "Mondays." Am I right?
The classic line.
Right. I want you to realize they aren't actually looking for a deep philosophical Marxist debate on the oppressive construct of the modern 5-day work week.
No, they are not.
They are just sending out little radar ping. They are establishing conversational safety. They're just pulling out their wallet and paying the entry fee at the door. If you realize that, small talk suddenly stops being this boring, soul-sucking obligation, and it starts becoming this really beautiful, invisible, shared ritual that we all participate in just to make each other feel secure in a chaotic world.
It fundamentally changes how you view every single one of those mundane interactions. It elevates them.
It totally does.
Small talk is the necessary load-bearing architecture that actually allows the heavier, deeper conversations to exist later on without collapsing the foundation of the relationship.
You have to build the foundation first.
However, establishing that baseline safety is only phase 1. It gets you in the door. But once you have paid the entry fee, once you have established through small talk that you are indeed friendly, normal, and safe, How do you actually move out of the lobby and into the main house?
Right, because we don't want to stay in the lobby forever.
Because nobody wants to talk about the weather for an hour. How do you get to the deep talk we actually crave without the transition feeling jarring, awkward, or forced?
And that brings us to what I think is the most highly tactical, immediately usable part of this entire deep dive. The actual step-by-step mechanics of moving from small talk to deep talk.
The mechanic.
To pull this off without sounding like a weird interviewer, we have to execute what is known as this segue. And within that segue, we need to master two very specific tools, the hook and the pivot.
The segue is a vital concept for conversational fluidity. In advanced language learning, segue is taught as a critical verb, meaning to transition smoothly and seamlessly from one topic to another without interruption.
Smoothly is the key word.
You cannot just abruptly stop talking about the humidity and blurt out a deeply personal question. You need a bridge. You need connective tissue. Transitioning smoothly from trivialities to deep topics requires hooks, pivots, and above all else, an undercurrent of genuine curiosity.
Let's define these terms clearly, because if you're someone who constantly gets stuck in what I call the weather loop, where you just keep agreeing that it's hot outside until one of you awkwardly walks away, these tools are absolute game changers.
They will get you out of the loop.
A hook is defined as a specific technique to take a closed, dead-end statement and open a door to personal history. The rule is, you don't just agree with a closed statement. You actively latch onto a specific word or concept within that mundane statement, and you use it to pull the conversation towards something more personal.
Let's examine a very specific hook example to see how this architecture works in real time.
Walk us through it.
Imagine you are at a networking event. The other person looks at the window and says, "The weather has been absolutely miserable lately."
A very standard complaint.
Now, a closed response, a response that kills momentum and leaves you in the weather loop, would be to simply say, "Yes, it really has been."
And then silence.
That leaves the ball entirely in their court, and if they have nothing else to say about the rain, the conversation dies right there. But a hook utilizes that trivial statement as a launch pad.
Okay, so what do we say instead?
Instead of just agreeing, you use a hook and say, "Yes, it reminds me of my time living in Seattle. Have you ever lived in a rainy city?"
Right. And third, you immediately threw the tennis ball back over the net with an open invitation for them to share their own personal data. Have you ever lived in a rainy city? You use the incredibly mundane, boring topic of rain as a literal hook to pull the entire conversation out of the lobby and into the realm of geography, personal history, travel, and life choices.
It is masterful when executed naturally, and this entire technique hinges on the next core concept, the power of curiosity.
Curiosity is huge.
The most captivating, memorable conversationalists in the world are not necessarily the best talkers, the funniest joke tellers, or the most articulate speakers. They are genuinely curious investigators.
They want to know about you.
They deliberately and strategically use open-ended questions to force the other person to articulate complex opinions, rather than allowing them to rely on binary yes or no answers.
The open-ended question is the absolute secret weapon of a great conversationalist. There's a great everyday example that illustrates the difference perfectly.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you're talking to a coworker about a movie you both just watched over the weekend. The lazy instinct, the default setting for most of us, is to ask a binary question. Did you like the movie?
Which is a conversational trap. It's a binary question that demands a binary answer. It only allows for a yes or a no, yes, I liked it, or no, I didn't.
Exactly.
And once they give that one-word answer, the conversation is suddenly stuck again. You have to scramble to find another question to keep it alive.
Right. You're back to playing golf.
Yeah.
But instead, if you take a second to formulate an open-ended question and you ask, what did you think about the ending? You have completely changed the architecture of the exchange.
It opens it wide up.
You cannot answer. What did you think about the ending? With a simple yes or no, you are practically forcing them to articulate a thought, to express a nuanced emotion, to build a mini argument about the plot. You are actively inviting them to step out of the shallow end of the pool and wade into the deep talk.
And this brings us to a specific challenge that I think is a brilliant, highly practical exercise for anyone to try. It's called the pivot practice.
I love this, and I am officially passing this challenge directly on to you, the listener.
Get ready to try this.
The next time you find yourself stuck in a boring, looping, small talk conversation, maybe you're at a dreaded mandatory networking event, or you're trapped next to a distant relative at a family gathering, and you realize you have been talking about highway traffic for 5 agonizing minutes. I want you to consciously use a bridge phrase to pivot.
Don't just sit there.
Don't just suffer through it. Use the exact phrases we're talking about today. Say, that reminds me of, or, speaking of which, have you ever used those specific phrases to invite a deeper story?
Make the leap.
Take the trivial topic, hook it, and pivot towards something meaningful. Traffic can pivot to road trips. Road trips can pivot to favorite childhood vacations. Suddenly, you aren't talking about traffic anymore. You're talking about their family history.
It takes a little bit of practice to make it seem completely natural, but it is a highly effective way to gently take control of the conversation's direction and add depth without being dominating or acting like the monopolizer we discussed earlier.
Yeah, you're guiding it, not stealing it.
But as we analyze the mechanics of moving into deep talk, we have to honestly confront a very real, very intimidating scenario that holds a lot of people back from even trying.
Okay, what is it?
What happens when you successfully execute the pivot? What happens when you build the bridge? You ask that brilliant, thought-provoking, open-ended question about the movie's ending or their time living in a rainy city, and the other person says absolutely nothing? They just stare at you.
Oh man, the silence, the dreaded dead air.
It's terrifying for people.
It is the most terrifying moment in any social interaction, is that awful stretching moment where your internal monologue starts screaming, oh no, I made it weird, I pushed too far, I crossed a line, they hate me.
We assume the worst.
We as a culture absolutely panic the second there is an ounce of silence in a conversation.
If we connect this fear to the bigger picture of how we interact today, it's clear that our society is deeply, fundamentally terrified of silence.
We really are.
We have been conditioned to view silence in a conversation as a catastrophic failure. We subconsciously think it means the connection has completely dropped, or the other person is angry with us, or we have bored them to tears.
So we freak out.
So, out of sheer panic, we rush to fill the void. We start back-channeling unnecessarily with rapid-fire uh-huhs, or even worse, we get so uncomfortable that we start answering our own question just to make the quiet go away.
I've done that so many times.
But if you look at the architecture of profound communication, it introduces a beautiful, essential concept. The pregnant pause.
The pregnant pause. It's such an evocative phrase.
It is.
A silence that is heavy. A silence that is literally pregnant with meaning while someone gathers their thoughts. I absolutely love how this shifts the paradigm. Silence is not a failure. It is a necessary structural space for meaning to actually form.
It's where the work gets done.
The overarching metaphor that really brings this all together is that conversation is a dance, not a race to the finish line. You must take your time. You must allow for the pauses between the steps.
Let's extrapolate on exactly why that pause is so critical, especially when you are actively transitioning into deep talk.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of it.
Think about what you've just done. If you have successfully pivoted, if you have bypassed the comfortable safety of small talk and asked a genuinely profound, complex, open-ended question, a pause is not a sign of your conversational failure.
It's not.
It is actually empirical, undeniable proof that you asked a genuinely good question.
Oh, that completely flips it.
Think about it logically. If you ask someone a question and they can answer it instantly, without a single second of hesitation, it means they're offering a pre-programmed response. They are giving you a rehearsed soundbite that they've given 100 times before.
Wow. Yes. That makes so much sense. If they answer immediately, they aren't thinking. They're just hitting play on a tape recorder they already have queued up in their brain.
Exactly. They aren't digging deep. They're just giving you the PR version of themselves.
Oh.
But if they pause, if they break eye contact and look away, if they are completely silent for 3, 4, even 5 agonizing seconds, it means you have asked them something they actually have to think about.
You challenged them.
You challenged them. They are actively formulating a complex opinion in real time. They are doing the incredibly hard, vulnerable work of genuine human connection right in front of you.
That is so powerful.
If you panic because you can't handle a few seconds of quiet, and you fill that silence with more of your own words, you are violently interrupting their internal thought process. You are stealing their opportunity to give you a truly authentic answer.
You're basically yanking them right off the dance floor just because they missed half a step while they were trying to figure out the rhythm of the song.
That's a great way to put it.
Conversation is a dance, not a race. You have to give them the grace and the space to find the beat. So what does this all mean for us?
Let's bring it all together.
We have covered so much ground today, decoding this invisible, intricate architecture of how we talk to each other. We started off by looking at the fundamental psychological difference between just speaking words and actually conversing.
The golf versus tennis.
Right. We realized that we need to stop playing conversational golf, just hitting our own isolated thoughts into the void while ignoring everyone else. And we need to start playing tennis. We need to anticipate, react, and actively engage in the mutual, respectful agreement of turn-taking.
We examined the very real dangers of becoming the monopolizer, hoarding the floor, and stealing time.
The press conference.
Exactly. We discovered that true active listening requires far, far more than just back-channeling with polite nods and empty uh-huhs.
Right, the fake listening.
True active listening requires the discipline of listening to understand, not just hovering and listening to respond. It requires actively validating their perspective and deliberately building on the speaker's points.
We tackle the deeply ingrained taboo of interruption and learn the vital, nuanced difference between aggressively hijacking a conversation to make it all about yourself and using cooperative overlapping to enthusiastically amplify someone else's point. We have to remember the Paris-London rule.
Never hijack Paris with London.
Never do it.
Yeah.
We also mounted a vigorous, hopefully convincing defense of small talk. We learned that chatting about the mundane weather isn't a pointless waste of time. It is the entry fee. It is the necessary evolutionary vetting process that proves we are friendly, normal, and safe enough to handle deeper truths.
And finally, we explored the tactical step-by-step mechanics of moving smoothly from that safe small talk into vulnerable deep talk, utilizing the hook, the power of the open-ended question, and the pivot.
The mechanics of the segue.
Yes, and perhaps most importantly, we learned to respect the profound weight of the pregnant pause, understanding that uncomfortable silence is very often the exact forge where the most profound meaning is created.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have a final application for you, a direct challenge to take out into the real world.
It's a good one.
I want you to take the ultimate test. Sometime today, in your very next conversation, whether it's with your spouse, your boss, or the barista at the coffee shop monitor, your own listening. I mean, really step outside yourself and watch your own brain work.
Really audit yourself.
Ask yourself, are you truly listening to understand the human being in front of you? Or are you just rapidly rehearsing your next clever sentence in your head, desperately waiting for them to take a breath so you can play your next golf shot? Becoming acutely aware of that selfish instinct is the very first necessary step to changing the entire architecture of your dialogues.
It is a phenomenal, difficult challenge. And as you go out to practice that today, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over.
Oh, let's hear it.
We discussed how small talk is the vital vetting process that proves we are safe to talk to. We also discussed how the pregnant pause is the sacred, necessary space where the deepest, most complex human thinking actually happens.
Yeah, those two things.
So consider this. In our increasingly fast-paced, hyper-stimulated world where we are constantly bombarded with instant communication, rapid-fire media, and 15-second videos, are we accidentally terrifying people away from deep connections simply because we are too afraid to let a few seconds of silence hang in the air?
Right.
If we constantly rush to fill every single quiet moment with a new question or a nervous joke just to soothe our own anxiety, we might be unintentionally signaling to the other person that we simply don't have the patience or the capacity for real depth.
That's heavy?
Maybe the most profound, most inviting, and most loving thing you can possibly say in your next conversation is nothing at all.
Let the silence do the heavy lifting. Embrace the pause, respect the architecture, and above all, enjoy the dance of your next conversation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Have you ever walked away from a conversation where, on paper, everything went perfectly, but you still felt this lingering, unexplainable sense of unease?
Yeah, that classic feeling where something is just off.
Exactly. Like, you said all the right words, they said all the right words, the grammar was flawless, the vocabulary was super sophisticated, but somehow the actual message completely missed the mark?
Right.
If you are the kind of learner who who isn't satisfied with the surface level mechanics of a subject, if you are the kind of person who really wants to master the hidden layers underneath human interaction, then you are exactly where you need to be.
Absolutely.
Because today, our mission is to move way beyond just vocabulary and grammar. We're going to decode the hidden, silent majority of human interaction. The subtext.
And it is entirely fitting that we're looking at this through the lens of language mastery today. Because the concepts we are unpacking, they're drawn from these advanced linguistic frameworks, specifically targeting what's known as the C2 level.
Right, the C2 level. For those who might not spend their days analyzing language acquisition. C2 comes from the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages.
The CEFR scale.
The CEFR scale. It ranges from A1, which is your absolute beginner, all the way up to C2, which is the absolute peak of fluency.
And at that C2 level, you're not just speaking the language anymore. You are operating with the nuance, the grace, and really the subconscious competence of a highly educated native speaker.
It bypasses the basic rules of syntax completely.
Exactly. It assumes you already know how to talk. What we are focusing on instead are the invisible mechanics, the nonverbal cues, the incredibly delicate art of diplomatic disagreement, and, well, something we all desperately need to master.
Oh, the graceful exit from a conversation.
Yeah, the graceful exit.
Okay, let's unpack this, because right at the very beginning of our exploration today, there's a metric that completely reframes how we should look at every single interaction we have.
It really does.
It's the 80-20 rule of communication. Simply put, communication is only about 20% verbal.
Think about that for a second. 20%.
Right, 20%. That means the vast, overwhelming majority of what you were actually saying to someone, that remaining 80% is entirely hidden in the subtext.
Staggering.
You could spend years building this flawless, extensive vocabulary, memorizing idioms, perfecting your pronunciation, but if you don't master that silent 80%, your actual intended message is going to be completely lost.
It really puts the mechanics of human connection into a stark perspective. We put so much conscious effort into selecting the right words.
Oh, we really do.
We format our sentences correctly. We obsess over ensuring we sound intelligent or articulate in meetings or on dates.
Oh, especially on dates.
But all of that effort, it only accounts for a tiny fraction of the actual signal being transmitted to the other person's brain.
So if you aren't actively managing that remaining 80%,
the tone, the posture, the pacing,
the micro expressions, the physical presence.
If you aren't managing that, you are essentially broadcasting heavy static over your own carefully chosen words. You are sabotaging your own 20%.
Which brings us perfectly to the first major hurdle we need to look at today: the illusion of fluency and the trap of being incongruent.
Incongruence.
Right. Incongruence is essentially a mismatch. It's a fundamental lack of harmony between what is being said verbally and what the body is actually doing physically.
It's when your 20% verbal output is completely betraying your 80% nonverbal broadcast.
And that mismatch, it creates this immediate visceral reaction in the person you were talking to.
It really does. It's a profound cognitive disconnect.
To really illustrate this, I'm going to physically act out a prime example of this incongruence from our source material.
Go for it.
I know you can't see me, but imagine I am standing here. My arms are tightly crossed over my chest. My shoulders are hunched up. My brow is furrowed. I am actively looking down at my watch. My feet are pointed right toward the door.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And in a completely flat, unenthusiastic, deadpan monotone, I say to you, that is fascinating.
Oh, wow. Even just hearing you describe that physical posture while delivering those specific words, it creates a tangible sense of tension.
Right.
What's fascinating here is how the listener's brain actively resolves that specific dissonance.
How so?
Well, when faced with incongruence, when the words explicitly state, "I am interested," but the entire physical being screams, "I am closed off, bored, and impatient," the brain has to make a split-second decision.
A subconscious decision.
Exactly, a subconscious decision about which data stream to believe. And the listener instinctively, without even having to process it logically, trusts the body language over the words every single time.
It is entirely instinctive. We don't sit there in the middle of a conversation and analytically weigh the two options.
No, of course not.
We don't think, well, their vocabulary implies interest, but their posture implies hostility. Let me just calculate the probability here.
Right, the brain just immediately defaults to the physical reality of the situation.
But why is that? Why do we completely discard the verbal data so quickly?
If we dig into the evolutionary psychology behind that instinct, it makes perfect logical sense.
Okay.
Words are highly constructed. They're conscious, deliberate, manufactured choices that take time to formulate in the prefrontal cortex.
And because they are conscious, you can easily lie with words.
Precisely. Body language, on the other hand, is largely subconscious. It's driven by our nervous system's immediate, unfiltered reactions to our environment and our internal state.
So the crossed arms, the checking of the watch.
The feet pointing toward an exit. Those are physical manifestations of a primal desire to protect oneself or escape a situation.
Wow.
Throughout human evolution, long before complex language developed, we relied entirely on nonverbal cues to assess threats, to gauge trust, and basically just to ensure survival.
So our brains are literally hardwired to prioritize the physical signals because historically those signals kept us alive.
Exactly. The listener's brain recognizes that those subconscious physical signals are far older, far deeper, and far more likely to represent the true emotional state of the speaker than a consciously manufactured sentence.
The brain knows that the body rarely lies, even when the mouth is trying to.
Yeah.
So the implications of this for you, the listener, are actually quite staggering. Think about how many times a day you might be accidentally sending the entirely wrong message despite using the perfectly right words.
Oh, it happens all the time.
You could be giving feedback to a colleague, telling them they did a phenomenal job on a presentation. But if your body is angled toward your computer monitor, your arms are crossed, and you avoid eye contact.
Oh, they are not going to hear the praise.
No, they're going to feel dismissed. The incongruence completely destroys the intent of the words. It's like pouring water into a bucket with a massive hole in the bottom.
It forces us to realize that true fluency, whether in a foreign language or your native tongue, isn't just about linguistic mastery. It's about physical and emotional alignment.
If your 80% isn't backing up your 20%, you aren't actually communicating. You are just making noise.
Which naturally leads us into the architecture of actually building a real connection.
Yes. We are talking about rapport. Rapport is that essential, almost magical sense of connection, mutual understanding, and trust between two people.
When you have rapport, the conversation flows effortlessly.
And when you don't, every word feels like a struggle.
Yeah.
And there's a specific psychological phenomenon that is crucial to establishing this invisible bridge: mirroring.
Mirroring is a deeply ingrained subconscious behavior. It's a phenomenon where, when we are in sync with someone, we naturally tend to mimic their physical state.
It happens without us even realizing it, right?
Exactly. If the person you're talking to leans in, you lean in. If they cross their legs a few moments later, you cross yours.
If they suddenly drop their voice to a hushed conspiratorial tone.
Yeah, you intuitively lower your voice to match their volume and cadence.
You sync up. You become this harmonized, unified entity in the space.
And the biological basis for this is fascinating. In the 1990s, neuroscientists discovered what are called mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons.
Right. Initially observed in primates, these are neurons in the brain that fire both when an animal performs an action and when the animal observes that exact same action being performed by another.
So your brain is quite literally simulating the other person's physical experience.
Yes. This is the biological bedrock of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
By physically reflecting someone's posture or vocal tone, you are silently communicating to their subconscious, I am like you. I am with you. I understand your state of being in this moment.
It creates a profound, unspoken psychological safety in the interaction.
It really does.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
If mirroring is supposed to be this natural biological expression of empathy driven by mirror neurons, what happens when we make it conscious? Like if I am sitting across from you and I am actively thinking, okay, they just touched their chin, I need to wait 3 seconds and touch my chin so they feel empathy isn't that inherently manipulative?
That is a phenomenal distinction.
Because if I'm faking my body language to hack your mirror neurons, I'm not actually empathizing with you at all. I am just tricking your brain into trusting me.
And that strikes at the very heart of why this is considered master-level communication. Is it a hack, or is it just consciously speaking the local language of the body?
Right.
When you are learning a spoken language, at first you have to consciously think about every vocabulary word and grammar rule. It feels clunky and artificial.
But eventually it becomes second nature.
Exactly. With body language, you are trying to consciously align your physical state to facilitate a smoother connection. However, your concern is completely valid, because when the conscious effort becomes too mechanical, it backfires spectacularly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you are going to attempt conscious mirroring, there is a massive flashing warning light you must pay attention to.
The caveat.
Yes, the caveat. The line between empathy and alienation is razor thin. Mirroring must be strictly, intensely subtle.
If you cross that line, the entire dynamic flips instantly. It goes from a warm, empathetic reflection to a rigid carbon copy.
And a carbon copy doesn't feel empathetic. It feels mocking. Or, let's just be honest, it feels incredibly creepy.
Very creepy.
It shifts the interaction into this behavioral uncanny valley.
That uncanny valley concept is exactly right.
Yeah.
Genuine subconscious mirroring feels warm because it is a natural byproduct of shared attention.
The focus is on the conversation.
Right. But when mirroring becomes a deliberate carbon copy, the other person's subconscious picks up that the mimicry is too perfect, too precisely timed.
It stops feeling like a natural biological reaction and starts feeling like a calculated predatory observation. It's like you are suddenly very aware that you are being watched and studied rather than being listened to.
Exactly.
If I scratch my nose and 1 second later you scratch your nose suddenly, I'm not thinking about the deep philosophical point you were making. I'm thinking, why is this person mimicking me? Are they making fun of me?
Is this a psychological trick they read about in an airport bookstore? And that sudden awareness of the artificiality shatters the rapport completely. Once the trust is broken by that realization of manipulation, getting it back is nearly impossible.
So what's the correct approach then?
The correct approach is what we might call a natural reflection. A reflection isn't a high-definition, pixel-perfect photograph. It's a softer, contextual echo of the original image.
Okay, so you match their energy.
Yes, you match the general openness or closedness of their posture. If they are relaxed and leaning back, you shouldn't be rigidly leaning forward, gripping the table.
But you do not mimic the specific mechanics of their micro-movements.
Never. It is an incredibly delicate, fluid balance to strike, which is why mastering it is placed at the absolute highest level of communicative skill.
And speaking of the absolute highest level of skill, let's pivot to what is arguably the ultimate test of conversational mastery.
Oh, this is a big one.
If you can do this, you have truly mastered not just the mechanics of dialogue, but the emotional complexities of the human beings engaging in it. The ultimate test is disagreeing politely.
And this is where we have to introduce a vital layer of context regarding how different societies handle conflict.
Right.
Because in many cultures globally, direct, blunt disagreement is the absolute standard. It's expected and it's respected.
In those contexts, telling someone you are wrong is simply an efficient exchange of facts. It's business.
Exactly. However, in other cultural frameworks, particularly in many English-speaking environments like the UK or parts of the US, that level of directness can be perceived as an aggressive, relationship-destroying attack.
Because directness can be perceived as an attack, English relies incredibly heavily on a linguistic strategy called hedging.
Hedging. It is one of the most brilliant and necessary linguistic tools we have for maintaining social harmony.
It really is. Hedging is the use of softening language to make statements less absolute, less dogmatic, or less aggressive.
You're wrapping your disagreement in layers of conversational bubble wrap before you hand it over to the other person.
I love that. Conversational bubble wrap. To illustrate this, let's contrast a blunt statement with its highly mastered alternatives. So the blunt confrontational version is simply, you are wrong, boom, period, end of story.
Which, in the context we're discussing, immediately triggers a defensive physiological response in the listener.
The adrenaline spikes, the walls come up.
Yeah.
Exactly. But look at the alternatives you can use to communicate the exact same underlying message. Instead of you are wrong, you say, I see your point, however, I am inclined to view it differently.
Or an even softer approach. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that premise.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, the fundamental shift that hedging creates is profound.
It all comes down to the ego.
Yep.
When you look someone in the eye and say, you are wrong, you are inherently attacking the person's judgment. You are attacking their intellect, their competence, and by extension, their core identity.
You're making them the problem.
Exactly. You're telling them they are broken or deficient in some way.
But when you use the softening language of hedging, when you say, I am not entirely sure I agree with that premise, you are entirely removing the person from the equation.
You are shifting the spotlight of the conflict.
You are taking the tension away from their identity and placing it squarely onto the abstract idea.
You are attacking the premise, the viewpoint, the inclination, never the individual holding it.
And this is absolutely vital for maintaining that delicate rapport we just spent so much time discussing. You cannot build or maintain a connection if the other person feels they are under a personal attack.
No, you can't.
Hedging allows you to engage in rigorous, uncompromising intellectual disagreement while simultaneously signaling that the underlying interpersonal relationship remains safe, valued, and respected.
It is the ultimate test because you have to manage your own emotional desire to be unequivocally right and subordinate it to the higher goal of keeping the conversation productive.
It requires immense emotional intelligence.
It really does.
And there is one specific phrase that acts as a magic key for this exact scenario. It's a phrase that completely depersonalizes conflict instantly, almost like a linguistic cheat code.
The phrase is, let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Yes, let me play devil's advocate.
It's a masterful conversational tactic, and it has a fascinating history that perfectly explains why it works so well.
Oh, I love this part.
The term devil's advocate, or advocatus diaboli, actually originates from the Catholic Church, specifically established by Pope Sixtus V in 1587.
Wait, really? It was an official job title?
It was. The official title was the promoter of the faith. When someone was proposed for sainthood, the church didn't want to just rubber stamp the canonization. They needed rigorous debate.
Okay.
So they assigned a specific person to argue against the canonization. Their literal job was to look for flaws in the candidate's miracles, to question their virtues, to be deeply critical.
But here's the crucial part. They weren't doing it because they personally hated the candidate.
No, not at all. They were doing it because the institution required the friction to find the truth. The role depersonalized the attack. It was a formalized duty, not a personal vendetta.
That is incredible, and it perfectly mirrors how we use it in modern boardrooms or dinner party debates.
It does.
When you announce that you're playing devil's advocate, you are explicitly signaling to the other person that the counter-argument you are about to present is being offered purely for the sake of the process.
You are telling them, I'm not picking a fight with you personally. I am putting on this specific historical hat so we can examine this idea together.
It creates a protective shield around the disagreement. It elevates the conversation from an argument to a discourse.
That distinction is so important.
Why?
Because when you say argument, people immediately put their armor on. Because an argument implies a zero-sum game. Someone has to win, which means someone has to lose.
It's a battle of egos.
Exactly. Discourse, on the other hand, leaves room for everyone to win. Discourse implies intellectual curiosity. It implies two people standing shoulder to shoulder, looking at a problem placed on the table in front of them, rather than standing face to face, attacking each other.
Think about how you can apply this in your own life. Imagine you are in a really tense meeting at work. The emotional temperature is rising.
We've all been there.
A colleague proposes a marketing strategy that, for a fact, has a massive glaring flaw. If you just jump in and say, that won't work, you forgot about the budget.
They're going to snap back at you to defend their competence in front of the boss.
But if you simply insert that phrase, let me play devil's advocate for a moment. What happens if we look at this from the angle of our Q3 budget constraints? You instantly cool the room down.
You allow them to evaluate the flaw in their own idea without feeling like they have to defend their honor. You give them an out.
It allows for the rigorous stress testing of ideas without the collateral damage of ruined relationships. It is strategic brilliance masked as casual, cooperative conversation.
It really is.
Well, we've spent all this time talking about how to navigate and manage the conversation while you are deep inside it. We've built the rapport, we've navigated the disagreements.
But we have to pivot to the final phase of communication.
The hardest part.
The hardest part. What is your exit strategy?
How do you successfully execute what we will call the extrication operation?
Extricate is such a precise, evocative word. It implies a situation that is complex, tangled, and requires deliberate, careful effort to escape from.
It implies you are caught in a trap. And the picture this paints is one we have all painfully, awkwardly experienced. You are at a gathering, a networking event, or a wedding, and you find yourself physically and socially cornered by the monopolizer.
Oh, we all know the monopolizer.
Oh, I have a visceral memory of this. I was at a cousin's wedding a few years ago. I made the mistake of making eye contact with my great uncle near the buffet line. He is a lovely man, but he is incredibly passionate about his model train collection. He cornered me between the carving station and the ice sculpture, and for 45 minutes, I received a chronological lecture on the evolution of O-scale train tracks.
Wow. 45 minutes.
My body language was screaming incongruence. My feet were practically moonwalking toward the exit. My smile was frozen. My eyes were darting around the room, pleading for a rescue, but I just kept nodding and saying, wow, that's so interesting.
You were completely trapped.
I was completely trapped because I didn't know how to extricate myself without being overtly rude.
The feeling of constraint in those moments is intensely real. Your internal monologue is panicking, trying to find an escape hatch. And in that desperation, you are faced with the most tempting, immediate option, the unannounced departure.
Often referred to colloquially as ghosting the party, or the French exit, or the Irish goodbye.
Right. It is the act of just turning around and walking away silently, or slipping out the back door without saying a word to anyone.
There are a lot of regional slang terms for this behavior, which highlights just how universal the desire to escape awkward social situations is.
But regardless of what you call it, the etiquette surrounding it is fascinating.
How so?
Well, while slipping away silently might be entirely acceptable if you are leaving a massive crowded nightclub where no one will notice your absence in a one-on-one interaction or a small gathering, it is considered deeply, fundamentally rude.
It is the absolute nuclear option. It burns the bridge to the ground.
It does. And to understand why it is so offensive, we have to look back at the core human need for validation and social dynamics.
Okay.
Every conversation is a micro-social contract. When you engage with someone, you implicitly agree to acknowledge their presence and their humanity.
So when you simply walk away without a concluding word,
Remember, you are violating that unwritten contract in the most jarring way possible. You are essentially communicating to the other person that they are so insignificant, their time and presence do not even warrant a single concluding sentence.
it abruptly severs the connection without any closure, leaving the other person feeling foolish, dismissed, and invalidated. It is the ultimate rejection. So if we can't just run away into the night and we can't suffer in silence for another 45 minutes, what is the mastery solution? How do we escape the monopolizer?
The answer is the transition statement.
And the rules for crafting a successful transition statement are incredibly strict. You must provide a valid reason to leave the conversation, and that reason absolutely cannot insult or diminish the other person.
It requires immense tact and situational awareness.
Let's compare the options. The brutally honest, unfiltered version would be to just look at the model train uncle and say, I am incredibly bored now and I want to leave.
Which is entirely true.
You are bored. You want to extricate yourself.
But saying that destroys his dignity.
Exactly. A masterful transition statement looks entirely different. It looks like this.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed hearing about the O-scale tracks, but I promised I'd say hello to Sarah before she leaves for the night.
Let's break down the anatomy of why that specific sentence is so effective. First, it offers a genuine compliment or validation I've really enjoyed hearing about.
This honors the time spent and validates the interaction.
Then the conjunction but pivots the direction of the sentence without negating the compliment that preceded it.
And finally, it provides an external, unarguable constraint. I promised I'd say hello to Sarah.
The absolute genius of this structure is that the reason for leaving has nothing whatsoever to do with the quality of the current conversation and everything to do with a pre-existing external obligation.
You aren't fleeing from them in horror. You are being tragically pulled away by the heavy burden of duty. It is out of your hands.
Exactly. And there's another even more sophisticated tactic for the exit strategy, which is called the future mention technique.
The future mention. It sounds like this. Look, I don't want to monopolize your time at this party. Let's definitely continue this later. So what does this all mean? Why is this specific phrasing considered the absolute peak of graceful exits?
The underlying genius of the future mention tactic is pure psychological judo. Look closely at the framing of the interaction. You are the one who desperately, internally wants to escape.
Right.
But you verbalize the exact opposite sentiment. You say, I don't want to monopolize your time.
Oh, wow.
You are taking your own intense desire to flee and repackaging it as an act of profound courtesy and consideration toward them. You are framing your departure as a selfless favor you're doing for them, ensuring they are free to mingle and enjoy the rest of the event.
It's incredible. You are setting them free from the conversational prison that they built to trap you in.
And by adding that final flourish, and let's definitely continue this later, you are signaling that the interpersonal connection remains entirely intact and valuable, even though the immediate physical interaction is concluding.
The core principle of this entire extrication process is all about saving face. Your goal is never just to walk away. Your goal is to firmly, decisively close the door on the immediate conversation while simultaneously validating the interaction, protecting the ego of the person you are speaking with, and leaving the overall relationship undamaged. It really makes you realize that navigating a single conversation from start to finish is a massive, exhausting undertaking.
It really is. Just look at the landscape we have covered today.
To communicate at this mastery level, you have to be actively listening to the 20% of verbal data, while consciously managing your own 80% of body language to avoid the trap of incongruence.
You have to employ subtle mirroring to activate mirror neurons and build empathy, while terrified of crossing the uncanny valley into creepy manipulation.
You have to use complex, historically rooted hedging to disagree without attacking an ego.
And finally, you have to craft elegant, psychologically complex transition statements to escape without causing an offense that violates the social contract.
High-level communication truly is a cognitive workout. Your brain is running a marathon while standing completely still.
It is exhausting just to analyze the mechanics of it, let alone perform it flawlessly in real time under pressure. But it is crucial to remember why this exhausting effort is necessary.
The reward.
Yes, the ultimate reward for mastering all these hidden layers, the empathetic mirroring, the diplomatic hedging, the careful saving of face, is genuine, frictionless connection.
When you manage the subtext correctly, you remove the defensiveness, the ego battles, and the misunderstandings that usually plague human interaction.
You clear the static. You create a pristine channel where true empathy, deep understanding, and meaningful collaboration can actually occur.
And to help you start building that pristine channel, we have a challenge for you, the listener. Sometime this week, in a real conversation, try to consciously deploy the devil's advocate technique.
But remember the rules we discussed.
Don't be annoying about it. Don't use it as an excuse to just be contrarian or difficult. Wait for a natural moment where you hold a genuine dissenting opinion. Then purposefully use soft hedging language to introduce that disagreement.
Say, let me play devil's advocate for a second, and then carefully observe what happens.
Watch how the other person reacts when you depersonalize the conflict. Watch how the temperature of the debate changes when it shifts from an argument to a discourse.
This raises an important question, and it's a philosophical boundary I want to leave you to mull over long after this deep dive concludes.
Okay, what is it?
We have spent this entire time analyzing these subtle subtextual cues, the calculated mirroring, the strategic hedging, the carefully constructed transition statements. Mastering these truly feels like gaining a psychological superpower for building connection and seamlessly managing complex social dynamics.
It does.
But what happens when you encounter someone else who possesses that exact same superpower?
Oh, that's interesting.
What happens to the dynamic of a conversation when both people are actively, consciously deploying these exact same strategies on each other at the exact same time?
Right. If you are subtly mirroring their posture to build rapport, and they are subtly mirroring your posture to build rapport,
Who is actually leading the interaction? When two absolute masters of subtext engage, does the conversation elevate into a beautiful, intuitive, frictionless dance of perfect empathy?
or does it devolve into a highly calculated, slightly paranoid game of conversational chess, where every softening word, every shifted posture, and every transition statement is a measured, tactical move in a silent battle for control?
It's a fascinating dynamic to consider as you become more aware of the invisible signals you are sending out into the world.
It really makes you wonder how much of our so-called natural connection is actually just brilliantly executed strategy. We hope this exploration into the hidden 80% of communication has given you some powerful new tools to navigate your own conversations. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the subtext. Keep paying attention to the unspoken words, and we will catch you next time.